Your life as every level of the most feared prisoner. You are doing push-ups in a concrete box 6 feet wide and 9 feet long, and you have been doing push-ups in concrete boxes for so long that the dimensions of the outside world have stopped feeling real. Not metaphorically, literally. Open space now produces a specific anxiety in your chest that solitary confinement never did, because solitary confinement is a problem you understand, and open space is a problem your nervous system has forgotten how to solve. You are the most relocated prisoner in British penal history. More than 120 different cells across more than 30 different institutions. Every time you arrive somewhere new, the walls are the same walls, and the door is the same door, and the mathematics of the space are the same mathematics, and you fill it with the only things that have ever been consistently yours. The body you have built into something that does not look like it belongs in the 20th century, and the mind that swings between extraordinary clarity and a darkness so complete that the people paid to understand it have spent decades disagreeing about what it actually is. You were not born Charles Bronson. You were born Michael Gordon Peterson. The name came later, earned in a different kind of arena, and the man who adopted it had already been changed by things that happened before anyone outside a courtroom knew his face. This channel goes inside the lives most people only hear about from the outside. Subscribe if you are new. Hit the bell. Now let's go.
Level 1. The Boy. Your childhood does not explain you. That is the first thing, and it matters, because everything that follows will tempt people to search backwards through your early years for the seed of what you became, and the searching will not find what it is looking for, because what it is looking for is not there. You grew up in a family with a father who ran a conservative club, an aunt and uncle who held civic office, a home that functioned, adults around you who described you in the years before everything changed as a gentle boy, good with younger children, protective of whoever needed protecting, bright enough to notice things that slower people missed. The violence did not come from home. It came from somewhere else. After a move north at 13, something shifted in the way you met the world. The first criminal charge arrived at that age, theft, handled as a juvenile matter. By your mid-teens, you were working when the work was available and not working when it was not. And the pattern of employment you accumulated was a record of someone who could not be contained by the ordinary structures of ordinary work for longer than weeks at a time. A supermarket, 2 weeks, gone. Factory lines, labor jobs, a stint as a circus strongman which suited something in you better than the rest of it. The performance of strength, the specific pleasure of being the most physically capable person in any given space. The criminal record accumulated alongside the employment record. Stolen vehicle, criminal damage, a smash and grab that should have been serious and was not treated as seriously as it might have been. Fines, suspended sentences, the machinery of justice processing you at a speed that suggested it did not yet understand what it was dealing with. At 20, you married, a woman who liked the suits and the swagger and the cockney sharpness of you. A son arrived the following year, a private person as it turns out, who will spend his life declining to discuss any of this publicly, which tells you something about what growing up with the shadow of the name means for the person in it. At 22, armed robbery, 7 years. And now, the walls.
Level 2. The Prisoner. The first prison does not contain you. It never will, not any of them. But the first one establishes the pattern quickly and completely. Within months, you attack 2 other prisoners without provocation. They put you in solitary. They transfer you. The new prison produces new confrontations with guards, new conflicts with other inmates, medication administered to manage what cannot otherwise be managed, and more solitary. You are a difficult prisoner in the specific way that the prison system does not have a protocol for. Not difficult because you are strategic about it. You are not planning anything, not working toward an objective through the violence. You are difficult because something in you and something in the institution are fundamentally incompatible at a level that no amount of processing or reclassification resolves. The walls produce a version of you that the open world had not yet fully revealed. The confinement does not subdue it. It concentrates it. You move between prisons, Liverpool, Hull, Leeds, change to the floor of the vans on the transfers because by now the system has learned that unchained is a risk calculation nobody wants to make. At Amley, a Victorian fortress of a building that looks exactly like what it is, you keep fighting. Guards, prisoners, anyone available. The beatings you receive back are significant and unreported in the ways that beatings inside institutions were unreported in that era. You recover from them in isolation. During one such recovery, the marriage ends, a piece of paper arriving in a space where you have nothing but time to read it, and nowhere to put what you feel about it. What keeps you together in these years, by your own account, is the body. The workout routine you develop in solitary is not rehabilitation in any sense the institution intends. It is ownership, the one thing in this concrete box that is entirely yours, that nobody can confiscate or restrict or take from you as punishment. The press-ups, the sit-ups, the resistance work done with improvised equipment and sheer repetition. The body becomes something extraordinary, and the extraordinary body becomes the thing you build an identity around when everything else the identity might have attached to has been stripped away. You attempt to poison another prisoner. The prison system, which has been running out of options for 2 years, transfers you sideways into the psychiatric system. You meet in that facility 2 men who will stay in your memory long after the institution has moved you on. They are among the most feared criminals in British history, and you call them the best people you have encountered. The friendship is brief. You are transferred again before it becomes anything more than a few weeks of recognition between men who, each in their own very different ways, have made themselves impossible to ignore. The facility does not suit you either. The medication, the other patients whose conditions are severe enough that you find yourself in the unusual position of being disturbed by what disturbs other people, the men who walk into walls with their heads, the one who bites himself. You are violent and ungovernable, and you know it, but you are not this, and the distinction matters to you in ways you cannot fully articulate. You spend years here. The rooftop protests begin here too. 3 days on a roof in 1982, tens of thousands of pounds of damage. You have discovered that the roof is the one place inside an institution where the institution temporarily loses control of the situation, and the temporary loss of control is the closest thing to power available to you. The artwork begins here too. Nobody plans this. You start sketching, cartoons, characters, dark and precise little drawings that come from somewhere that the violence also comes from, but that exit in an entirely different direction. You win awards for them inside the facility. The psychiatrists who cannot diagnose you are at least able to observe that the drawing settles something that medication has never reliably settled, and that the settling is real even if the mechanism is not understood. You are transferred back to prison, then to another facility, then to prison again. The pattern is the map of a system that does not know what to do with you, expressed as geography.
Level 3, the name. You were released in 1987. You have been inside since your early 20s and you are now in your mid-30s, and the world outside has not waited for you, which is not a surprise but is still a specific kind of reckoning you have to stand in front of. The first thing you do outside, genuinely among the first things, is acquire a water pistol, modify it to look more convincing, and use it to compel a man to drive you to Luton. This would be funny if it were not the beginning of a sequence that ends back inside a cell. In Luton, you fight. Bare knuckle, cash in hand, in the specific world that exists at the edges of the legitimate economy and that has its own hierarchies and its own reputations and its own measures of what a man is worth. You are very good at this. You fight the men available and you win, and you are offered a fight against a Rottweiler for cash and you take it and you win that too, and the winning of it will bother you for the rest of your life, because you are not, at the core of whatever you are, someone who wants to hurt things that cannot choose the fight. In this world, you acquire a name. Charles Bronson, borrowed from a Hollywood actor whose face communicates a specific kind of dangerous competence that the bare-knuckle circuit finds useful as a brand. You like the name. It fits the version of yourself you have been building since the first time you picked up a weight in a solitary cell. You will eventually make it legal. But the name does not keep you out. Armed robbery sends you back inside within months, and the second stretch produces everything the first one produced. Violence, solitary, transfers, beatings, more rooftops, more confrontations with guards and inmates and governors. In 1989, someone puts a knife in your back several times. You recover. You do not tell anyone who did it, which is either loyalty or contempt for the system, or both, and the line between those two things has never been clear in your case. You are out briefly in 1992, 53 days. Back in, out again, and then arrested on weapons charges. While awaiting trial in a remand facility, something snaps. You take a librarian hostage, and the negotiation that follows is the thing people will quote for decades. You want a helicopter, an inflatable doll, a cup of tea. This is sometimes presented as proof of madness, and sometimes as proof of the opposite, that you understand the performance of madness well enough to use it, that you know how to make a situation impossible to ignore. You receive 8 years for this. The years continue.
Level 4. The Darkness. There is a place in the British prison system called the Hannibal Cage. It was built for a specific prisoner whose acts were so extreme that the institution needed a new category of containment. You end up there. You end up there because you have been everywhere else, and the system is running out of options, and the options it has left are the ones it built for people it has no other answer to. You are in your 40s now. The body is still extraordinary. The workout routine has continued through every cell, every transfer, every stretch in isolation, and the physical condition you have maintained across 2 decades of confinement is genuinely remarkable, documented in a fitness book that will later sell widely and be reviewed positively by people who have no idea the circumstances under which it was written. But the darkness is accumulating. The years in isolation without light, not metaphorically, literally without light, kept in conditions that affect your vision and your social responses in ways that are documented by the lawyers who eventually start paying attention to your case. You are a difficult prisoner, and the system's response to a difficult prisoner is isolation, and isolation over years produces specific damage, and the specific damage makes you more difficult, and the cycle has no natural exit. You take 2 more hostages during this period, 2 Iraqi men who are in the prison on unrelated charges, held in your cell while you demand things that escalate from practical to surreal over the course of the standoff. They call you the general. You make them sing songs. You ask for ice cream. You let them go when you let them go, and another 7 years are added to what you are carrying. Your father dies during this period. You do not get to grieve the way people grieve on the outside. You grieve in a cell, alone, with whatever the inside of a cell offers someone who has just lost his father, which is nothing except the walls and the routine and the body and the drawings. The drawings are getting better. There is a prison worker who criticizes them, says something about the quality or the subject matter or the value of what you are making. You take him hostage. You let him go quickly. But the incident tells you something you may not have articulated before. The drawings are not separate from everything else. They are the same thing. The same force that produces the violence produces the art, and when something threatens the art, the force responds the way it always responds. A senior officer at one institution during these years is a man named Voss, not remembered by history the way you are, but present in the record of specific incidents in a way that matters. He is not a sympathetic figure in the institutional sense, and you are not a sympathetic figure in any conventional sense, and the relationship between you is the relationship between an immovable object and a force that does not recognize the concept of a movable. He is the one who tells the governor, after a particular incident, that you are not what the system has been treating you as. You are something else. What that something else is remains, for years, unresolved.
Level 5. The Artist. The name changes again. Charles Salvador, taken from the painter whose work you have been looking at in whatever art books the institution allows, and who represents something about color and distortion, and the interior landscape turned visible that you recognize without being able to fully explain the recognition. The old name is retired. You say in one of the interviews that start to reach you from the outside world after the film makes you a household name that the old version of you is finished, that Charles Bronson, the bare-knuckle fighter, the hostage-taker, the man who bent cell bars with his hands, is a character you inhabited and have now stepped out of. People are skeptical. They are not entirely wrong to be skeptical. But the art is real. 200 pieces sold at auction, £38,000 raised, and a significant portion of it sent to charities, brain tumor research, a children's hospice in Luton, the homeless population of Oxford. These are not the donations of someone performing rehabilitation for an audience. These are the decisions of someone who has found something that connects the inside of his head to the outside world in a way that violence never did. Because violence always brought the walls closer, and the art keeps pushing them back. You get married again, to an actress who has been corresponding with you. She tells anyone who will listen that she believes you should be released, that the man she knows in letters and visits is not the man the institution records describe. She is not the first person to make this argument, and she will not be the last. The argument goes like this. Whatever you were at 22 when the armed robbery sentence began, the 40 years that followed were not rehabilitation, and were not containment, and were not justice in any meaningful sense. They were what happens when a system encounters something it cannot process, and responds by applying more of the only tool it has. The counter-argument goes like this. You attacked a governor as recently as 2014. You have never demonstrated in any sustained and verifiable way that you can exist within an institution without eventually turning on it. Every period of relative quiet ended with an incident that resets the clock. You are somewhere in the space between these two arguments. You have always been somewhere in the space between things that the systems available cannot fully hold. Level 6. The Record. 36 years in solitary confinement, out of more than 40 years served. This number sits differently depending on how you approach it. If you approach it as a record of institutional failure, the cumulative result of applying isolation as a response to isolation-produced behavior in a cycle that has no off-ramp, the number is an indictment. If you approach it as a record of what one man's conduct required from the system charged with containing him, the pragmatic accounting of a series of incidents that each individually justified the response they received, the number is simply a total. Both things can be true. They usually are. What is not in dispute, the physical record, is extraordinary. 6 unofficial world records for strength and fitness feats performed in conditions that would stop most people from performing any exercise at all. A fitness manual that has sold millions of copies worldwide and been reviewed seriously by people who train seriously. The most prolific rooftop protest record in British penal history. The most transfers in British penal history. A body maintained across 5 decades that remains, by physical measurement, remarkable. What is also not in dispute, the human cost distributed across prison staff and fellow inmates and lawyers and family members is real and compounded, and not resolved by any of the art or the books or the charitable donations, though none of those things are nothing.
Voss, who retired from the prison service in the mid-2000s and gave a single interview to a local newspaper in which he said he had spent 30 years trying to understand what the system had made of Michael Peterson, said one thing that stays in the account. He said, "He was always in there. You just had to find which door he'd built over the front of him and figure out if you had any business knocking on it. Nobody knocked in time, or nobody knocked in the way that could be heard, or the door was built so thick by then that the sound didn't carry. Hard to say which."
Level 7. The question.
He once said, "I'm a nice person most of the time, but sometimes I lose all my senses. That doesn't make me evil, just confused. You can do whatever you like with that." The question the record forces, not the question about guilt that was settled in courtrooms across 5 decades, is a different one. The question the record forces is about what a justice system is actually for. If it is for punishment, the record is extensive. If it is for rehabilitation, the record is failure. Not necessarily his failure, possibly the system's failure, possibly both at once. If it is for public safety, the record is complicated because the violence was almost entirely directed at people inside the institution, and the institution's response to violence directed at it was to produce more violence directed at him. And the loop between those two things is where the 40 years actually lived. He donated his auction earnings to the sick and the homeless. He maintained a body that has genuinely inspired people who read the book and implemented the routines. He made art that sold and art that he gave away, and art that went to people who needed something from it. He took hostages and attacked governors and bent cell bars and spent decades in darkness. He is all of these things at once, and the "at once" is the part that doesn't fit inside the story anyone wants to tell about him, the story where he's a monster or the story where he's a martyr. He's neither. He's a man the system encountered at 22 and could not put down or let go for more than 50 years. And somewhere inside that 50 years is the thing that might have been different if a single variable had shifted at a single moment. The right door knocked on at the right time, the right person standing on the other side of it when it opened. That person might have existed. The record doesn't say. The record just says what happened. What happened is everything you have just read. If this one stayed with you, share it. This channel goes inside the stories most people only see headlines of. Subscribe if you are new and hit the bell so you don't miss what comes next. The cell is 6 feet wide. The push-ups continue. The walls are the same walls they have always been. He is still in there, somewhere.